Hello, welcome to Mountain Jim Card Collectibles. Having a great week so far. Getting all the sports card content that you can ingest on YouTube, which I've noticed I'm not seeing near as much card content. I know it's kind of a tough point of the year, summertime, and people aren't, as holed up in their homes as often, looking at their sports cards. So I get that. But what I've noticed about sports cards and just a lifetime of living in the United States is I just feel like the sports card corporations like to create an illusion. Just like living in the United States. A lot of people in the United States believe they have freedom. You get to vote in elections, but they don't talk about things like, say, the Electoral College. So when you vote for a president, the way the Electoral College works is, a state tallies up, whoever has the most votes for the presidency, whether it be Democrat or Republican, and it counts those votes, mind you, of whoever won, and they get the Electoral College votes. But the issue I have with it is, well, they take, whoever lost and they just throw those votes away, garbage. That's not freedom. That's kind of a lie. You can't pretend it's not. I mean, yeah, I get it that they don't want to use the popular vote. But then, the other illusion of freedom, of course, is how, I'm not sure if you've done it before, but you vote for something locally, like, a new law or something, and then the legislature comes around, every 2 or 3 years or whenever they come around, and they just completely destroy all of, the laws that citizens have voted in. So to me, the U.S. is great at giving people an illusion of freedom when there really isn't much freedom at all. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised that when it comes to sports cards, that it tends to be the same way. Now, what is a monopoly power due to a lack of competition? And if you want to pretend that there's freedom in sports cards, kind of like there's freedom in the U.S., you can keep lying to yourself, That's what a lot of Americans do to get through the days. I mean, I can't argue against that. I mean, whatever you have to do, to get through your life. But anyway, a monopoly is formed when one company controls the entire market for a particular product or service. This company becomes the only option for consumers, and without competition, it can charge any price it wants, reduce quality, and or limit choices without fear of losing customers. Well, I feel like the sports card industry is currently losing a lot of customers because of, their monopolistic practices. And they tend to do what they do. Like it says here, they can charge any price they want. They can reduce the quality. They can limit the choices without fear. And American consumers just go with it. They don't know any different. I mean, when you look at the world of sports cars, the United States, they do kind of blend together now, don't they? What is it about the United States? We always tell ourselves we live in the greatest country in the world. But when you begin to dig into the numbers, that's not really the truth. Why do Americans suffer the way we do? Well, the biggest thing that I've noticed is our lack of factories and manufacturing. Now, when Americans think of manufacturing, they always think of the biggest, factories imaginable, something like a Ford factory, a GM factory. But if you look at the factories, say in China, they have a lot of factories that build stuff that isn't, major industries. And so with China having 6.5 million manufacturing factories in comparison to the U.S., number of approximately around 700,000, Americans are great at kind of lying to themselves about reality. Well, maybe we do have a lot of consumers in the US, but we don't really have, the factories to go with it. And so I guess I shouldn't be surprised when we get gaslit all the time from the higher ups in the sports card realm of, this kind of false choice that they give you. And when I talk about false choices, when you have a monopoly, you want that monopoly obviously to feel like it's a free market, to an extent. And, here I am at, Topps Now. And this is what I like to think of as the monopoly trying to fill in the gap of a free market. Yeah, there's other card companies out there. We have Leaf, we have Upper Deck, but, let's face it, Topps Fanatics is going to be holding a monopoly of sports league licenses for sports cards for around the next 20 years. So you have to kind of look at, well, what sort of choices does the monopoly give you, when it takes away all of your other choices, for me, for baseball cards, to be honest, I'd rather be purchasing licensed Upper Deck baseball cards than Topps cards. Why? I mean, I'm just burnt out on Topps licensed cards. The high prices, the way they design the cards, it's just a wash, rinse, and repeat for the most part. But, when you have a monopoly, they want you to believe that they're giving you a lot of choices. So they give us something like Topps Now. And, I'm just kind of looking at some of the stuff that Topps Now is shilling out, currently. Like this Billy Wagner, Ichiro, Dick Allen, CC Sabathia. I'm bummed out that, just found out a few hours ago that Ryne Sandberg passed away. That's passed away from complications from cancer, at only age 65. I watched a lot of Ryne Sandberg games in my lifetime. He was a great player. I wish he was still around. I know that Ryne Sandberg was considered the kind of the great white hope there for a while because they had a dispute, Barry Bonds did at a time, and he just saw how different Ryne Sandberg's contract was being treated in comparison to like Barry Bonds' contract with the Pirates, So I always considered Ryne Sandberg the great white hope because of that issue with Barry Bonds, but nonetheless, I was a big fan of Ryne Sandberg. But either way, for Ryne Sandberg, his cards, during the time, say, of the junk wax era, it was nice to purchase different licensed Ryne Sandberg cards. If you get burnt out of, this manufacturer, you can always, switch over to this manufacturer that's licensed. I like that. I like the freedom of choice. And, we're kind of living in America that doesn't seem to like that freedom of choice for one reason or another. I mean, you can just look at the way our, the political parties are acting in Washington, D.C., like the Republicans. I mean, they're proudly becoming a fascist party. They won't admit it, but every now and then they do. They don't want to give you any freedom of choice. And to a degree, these monopolies, Panini, Topps, they're the same way. They may pretend to give you a freedom of choice. It's almost like, hey, we're allowing you to vote in this election for, to change this law. When in a few more months, our legislature is going to come back and completely just steamroll your vote, and take it away, That is, this kind of illusion of freedom that goes with living in the U.S. is you don't really have a lot of freedom. You can pretend you do. You can look at certain things and tell yourself you do, but if you want to pretend that you have all this freedom of choice when it comes to sports cards, yeah, I mean, it goes along with living in the U.S., We have a lot of freedom of choice, don't we? We can choose Topps or Panini for licensed products. I mean, it's just such a joke, And, I don't get a lot of views on my channel overall. I mean, when I look at other sports cars channels, they're typically just showing out daily, little snippets of news, which I know I'm kind of like Sports Card Radio. I don't like little snippets of news here and there. It just becomes annoying, and you always got, these shows where they're always, promoting this and that, not my interest. But it's your interest, I mean, a lot of these people that like sports cars, they like that setup. I would prefer more freedom of choice. And honestly, when it comes to sports card content, I don't get a lot of freedom of choice, kind of like when I go out and buy sports cards, I mean, what's freedom of choice in sports cards? Is freedom of choice Panini Instant in sports cards? Is freedom of choice Topps Now in sports cards? No, it really isn't. I would like to be able to go and purchase licensed cards from different people, different corporations. I am just burnt out on Topps and Panini. But they keep saying, open up your mouth because we're serving you good food. And I'm going, you know what? It doesn't taste very good to me. I'm tired of this menu. I just would like a different menu. And so when I talk about this illusion, of freedom in sports cards, it really trickles down everywhere, In my lifetime, I have seen so many of my freedoms get destroyed for so many reasons, politicians, whatever, And so I'm not very surprised to see, this illusion of freedom when it comes to sports cards. You can watch other, gurus on YouTube and they will gaslight you into believing, well, you have all sorts of freedom. You can go back and buy junk wax, and you can go buy old 80s cards, and you can buy, some 90s junk wax, whatever. That's more affordable than, the cards of this day and age. But I just don't see why there has to be such a monopoly on the prices of cards, some of these prices are just so atrocious that I see. I mean, who are they really, made for? The 1% club? I mean, everything is about the 1% anymore. I live in Montana. Our governor, Greg Gianforte, he's a billionaire. He's from the 1%. Look at our president, Donald Trump. He's from the 1%. Everything is about the 1%. And what gets me is even, the sports card hobby that I've always loved, that I always felt like I would have a place in growing up. It just feels like when I look at so much of the prices from our monopolies who gaslight us all the time, it just feels like another, guess what? Time to go down the road because we're not giving you that freedom of choice. And to me, it really feels like I'm living in the antithesis of a lot of the time that I grew up in, Boy, I guess I should have been enjoying that junk wax era, huh? Why? It sure is nice having freedom of choice to buy licensed product, because in the future, if we were sitting in 1991, 1998, I'd be telling you, you're not going to have any freedom of choice. You're going to get gaslit to no end, just like with everything else in our current age, So if you believe that you have freedom of choice, like, say, Panini Donruss, and all these brands, that Panini has picked up, that used to be, independent brands, I like to say, yeah, Panini Donruss. That's about right, isn't it? Everything is a joke to an extent in sports cards. So keep on, I guess, getting gaslit by a lot of these other gurus on YouTube that want you to pretend that you have a freedom of choice in the U.S., but eventually you might wake up in the morning and go, you know what? That guy that I watch every now and then on YouTube that doesn't really get many views, he's right. It'd be nice to just purchase, a different card set that's licensed, that's not Topps or Panini or any of the baloney that goes with it. Anyway, I'd like to thank my subscribers. I'd like to thank my recent subscribers. I'd like to thank any viewer who hasn't subscribed. Please subscribe so I can continue to improve the channel. I know nobody likes to subscribe. But then again, I'm not getting a lot of views anymore. lately, because I don't know what it is about sports cards, but let's just face it. Good luck out there with sports card people, because, maybe they do like the fascism that goes along with sports cards in today's day and age. The fascism of monopolies. But you know what? I just don't like it. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. Bye.